I had firmly refused to babysit my nephew after breaking my leg. But my sister, like a whirlwind, burst into my hospital room shouting, "You're just pretending to get out of helping me." The nurse carrying medication froze, stunned. Trying to stay calm, I suggested, "Okay, let's look at my x-rays together." At that moment, the doctor walked in with my chart in hand. My sister's face turned pale. In the ensuing silence, the doctor said, "Actually, there's something else you should know. My name is Alice Smith. I've lived in Asheville, North Carolina, for all 42 years of my life. My life revolved around the same streets, surrounded by faces aging alongside mine. No glamour, just stability and predictability, like the steady ticking of an old clock, even as the world outside changed beyond recognition. I taught English at the high school. The students were a little afraid of me, but I hoped they secretly respected me. I took my job seriously, proud to teach them not only Shakespeare and Fitzgerald, but also how to see the little cracks in the fabric of the world through which real stories seep. I guess I was too good at noticing those cracks everywhere, except those growing in my own family. Thursday was a typical Southern day, humid, sultry, sticky with heat. It was on such a day that my life turned upside down. I was helping Debbie, my neighbor and old friend, move furniture. She'd managed to unearth a hideous antique dresser at a flea market, and against all logic, I'd agreed to help lug the thing into her house. It turned out to be impossibly heavy, this carved oak monster with stubborn, rattling drawers. We, soaked and gasping for breath, finally dragged it to the porch. One wrong step, and my foot treacherously slipped off the last step. No grace, no slow-motion shot worthy of a Hollywood movie. Just a sharp, crunching sound and the blinding realization that my body was not where it was supposed to be. I remember how pleasantly cool the earth felt against my cheek. I remembered Debbie's desperate cry, shouting my name as if she could rewind time with the power of her voice alone. In the hospital, everything was bathed in the sterile, painful light of fluorescent lamps. Dr. Rodriguez, tired but with kind eyes, showed me the x-ray. Where the straight, white bone of my shin should have been, there was now a jagged, unsightly mass. "Spiral fracture," he said wearily. "It will require surgery and a long recovery period." My life, once measured and calm like a quiet harbor, had suddenly turned into a raging ocean. Not yet fully recovered from the anesthesia in the hospital room, through the haze of pain, I frantically remembered the unsent message. My fingers, as if foreign, didn't obey me. The letters blurred before my eyes. "Beth, I broke my leg. Serious. I'm in the hospital. Won't be able to babysit Michael this weekend. Sorry." With a heavy heart, I pressed send, foreseeing the storm. Betty, my younger sister, only 2 years younger, had always had an explosive temper and a phenomenal memory for grievances. She took disappointments extremely hard. So, when the next day the door of my room burst open and Beth stormed in like an angry fury, I wasn't surprised. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't pay attention to the IVs stuck in my arm or the massive cast that bound my leg. Her face, distorted by anger and reproach, expressed only one thing. "You're just pretending to get out of helping me." The words cut to the heart, more painful than any fracture. I was stunned, unable to utter a word. Nurse Jessica, with a red badge on her chest, froze in the doorway, her face expressing utter amazement. Betty, frozen in a pose of offended dignity, hands on her hips, in her starched jeans and with her impeccable hairstyle, exuded righteous anger. I wanted to scream, to burst into tears, but instead, gathering the remnants of my composure, I quietly said, "Then, let's look at the scans together." No drama, just a statement of fact, but apparently enough to draw her attention to the glowing screen by my bed. And as if on cue, Dr. Rodriguez walked into the room with my chart in hand. He glanced at this strange scene, the tense nurse, the red-faced sister, and me, cowering under the blanket. "What's going on?" he asked in an even, calm voice. Betty opened her mouth, ready, apparently, to unleash a new torrent of accusations, but the doctor gently but authoritatively interrupted her. "We found something else," he said. There was such weight in his calm tone that my heart painfully constricted. He turned the screen, showing the already familiar fracture, and then pointed to a cloudy shadow near the knee joint. "Some kind of formation," he explained. "Most likely benign, but a biopsy is needed." It seemed like the air had left the room all at once. Betty instantly turned as pale as a sheet. Jessica froze, her hand holding a cup of pills out to me. I stared at the blurry spot on the monitor, and memories of lonely nights flooded over me. Everything I had put off until later. Travel, love, even a new couch seemed like an unaffordable luxury, because there was always something more important, someone else's needs that required immediate attention. Betty, like a startled bird, fluttered out of the room without a word. And here I lie, under the merciless glare of the lamps, with a throbbing pain in my leg and a crushing fear of cancer, and the thought pierces me. Maybe this is the moment. Maybe now I'll stop apologizing for wanting something for myself. Anything. The days blurred together. Tests, biopsies, pain, snatches of sleep, faces of visitors, one after another. Mom brought a bouquet of chrysanthemums from the nearest supermarket, which smelled stale. She sat on the edge of my bed, as if ready to jump up at any second. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, betrayed nervous tension. "Betty's just worried," she mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "She has so much going on with Michael right now." I let her words hang in the air, feeling their weight and stickiness. I knew this song by heart. Betty is always worried. Betty always has a lot going on. And how did it always end up falling on my shoulders? After Mom left, the room was filled with a ringing silence, as if the air had been sucked out. Not even a week after I came home, exhausted, bruised, with a throbbing pain in every bone, moving with difficulty on a walker, the phone rang. Betty's name flashed on the display. For a long time, I just stared at it, mesmerized. When I finally decided to answer, her voice was not apologetic, but rather impatient and demanding. "I need you to watch Michael for a couple of hours," she blurted out, without saying hello. "I have a hair appointment." "No." "How are you?" "No." "I'm so sorry." No hint of acknowledgement of what had happened between us. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, feeling my heart pound dully in my chest. "I can't," I replied quietly. "I'm recovering." Her sigh was so loud and heavy that it seemed to make the phone vibrate. "You're so selfish," she hissed. "You only think about yourself, Alice." As always. A long, agonizing silence hung in the air. I could hear the muffled sounds of cartoons from the television and Michael's commotion in the background. Years of canceled plans, endless last-minute babysitting requests flashed through my head, and every time I swallowed my resentment and anger because it was easier than facing her reaction. The fear, which had gripped my chest like ice at just the mention of the word maybe, seemed to freeze in the air. Without saying another word, I hung up. No blocking. No long, hysterical messages trying to justify myself. I just put down the phone and stared out the window, where the midday sun painted the world in a muted, melancholic gold. Something broke inside me, slowly but irreversibly, like a tectonic fault giving way under pressure. The biopsy results came back a few days later. Benign. A wave of relief washed over me, but it didn't wash away what had happened. It didn't mend the gaping cracks that had opened up inside me from Betty's accusations. I started going to therapy. I sat uncomfortably in the sterile beige room while a woman named Jennifer asked questions I desperately didn't want to answer. "Why do you feel responsible for fixing everything?" she asked once, tapping her pen on her notepad. I didn't have an answer. I only knew that somewhere along the way, I had learned that it was better to be needed than noticed. Silence, like a thick curtain, enveloped me after Betty stopped calling. Mom was silent too. For a long time. I didn't try to break through the silence, for the first time in my life, I guess. I just let it be. I spent days on the balcony with a book. The sun gently warmed my healing leg, and I dreamed of a life where I didn't have to apologize for being me. A world where I didn't have to explain my pain to make someone else comfortable. The world outside the window continued to rush forward, oblivious to the quiet revolutions taking place in my small apartment. The days grew longer, and the cicadas chirped louder. Summer, as if exhaling, slowly flowed into autumn. I wasn't healed yet, no. But I was learning. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain it to anyone. The days slipped through my fingers like water. I counted them not by dates, but by the slow changes that were happening outside my window. The leaves were turning yellow at the edges, and the air in the mornings was becoming cool and crisp. Physical therapy became a routine. 3 times a week, I went to a nondescript building behind the shopping center, where cheerful therapists with sharp voices commanded, "Lift, bend, pull, endure." I hated it. I hated how my body felt foreign, stubborn, and unliftable. Each session was a struggle, and I felt betrayed by my own body. I couldn't stand the judging looks from those in their early 20s, as if they were rubber bands snapping back after being stretched. I hated feeling so weak, so vulnerable. But I kept coming. To every session, every painful grimace, every uncertain, shaky step forward. One morning, after an exhausting therapy session, I wandered into the daily grind. A cozy, lived-in place where everyone knew each other's preferences by heart, and the table always wobbled no matter how many napkins you shoved underneath. Alice Jimmy, the owner, called out to me as soon as he saw me hobbling in. His weathered face lit up with a warm, encouraging smile. "Long time no see," he said. I smiled wearily back and sank into a booth by the window. "You're just what the doctor ordered," he said, placing a cup of scalding black coffee in front of me without even asking what I wanted. "Heard about your leg. Sorry to hear it." "Yeah," I mumbled, wrapping my chilled hands around the mug. "Bad fall." He nodded, as if understanding something far beyond just the words. "Falls teach you what you're made of." I was silent. I wasn't sure what I was made of anymore. As I lifted the mug to my lips and took a sip of the strong, bitter coffee, I suddenly noticed a figure frozen in the doorway. Ashley Howard, a woman I hadn't seen since high school. She still wore the same heavy black eyeliner and chunky rings, but now they seemed less like symbols of rebellion and more like heavy armor. Ashley caught my eye. For a moment she hesitated, as if battling herself, and then resolutely headed towards me across the room. "Hey, Alice," she said, sliding into the booth across from me without waiting for an invitation. Hey, Ashley, I replied, trying to maintain politeness despite the sudden surge of anxiety. She leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I've heard everything. Betty's telling everyone you're faking it, that you're just milking this for sympathy. Her words crashed over me like icy boulders. Of course it's Betty, I thought. It wasn't enough for her to just hate me. She needed an audience to enjoy it. Small town, Ashley shrugged, as if that explained everything. And maybe it did. In Asheville, secrets didn't last long. Truth mixed with rumor, and what people chose to believe said more about their own hearts than about me. Thanks, Ashley, I said quietly, feeling a heavy emptiness growing inside me. She patted my hand awkwardly, as if unsure whether she was comforting me or just rubbing salt in the wound, and then hurried away. I sat in the cafe long after my coffee had gone cold, watching the cars crawl slowly down the street. The sky frowned, heavy with leaden clouds, promising rain soon. That night, loneliness squeezed my throat like a noose. The apartment lived its own life. Creaking floorboards, sighing drafts, as if commiserating with my sorrow. I desperately tried to lose myself in a book, but the letters blurred before my eyes, losing all meaning. The television, turned on in the hope of drowning out the silence, only irritated me, making my skin crawl. Finally, I scrolled aimlessly through old photos on my phone. There was Michael at 3 years old, Betty beaming with pride as she hugged him. And there was Christmas. My face was frozen in a strained smile as I handed out gifts I'd carefully saved for all year. Snapshots of a life where I was always in the background, always the one who came to the rescue when everyone else disappeared. A wave rose within me, thick and bitter, and I couldn't tell if it was anger or despair. Maybe it was both, intertwined into one suffocating lump. I threw the phone face down on the table and allowed the darkness to engulf me like a viscous shroud. The days dragged into weeks. The messages from Betty stopped. No apologies, no explanations, just a crushing silence. My mother sent a short, terse text. Family should stick together. Maybe you should call? I ignored it. Family. The word had been used as a weapon my entire life. Family is sacrifice. Family is swallowing resentment and pain. Family is pretending everything's okay, even when you're falling apart. But what if it wasn't? What if family could be something different, something healthier, something that didn't leave you bleeding in the dark? The thought was both chilling and exhilarating. One day, navigating the labyrinthine aisles of the local supermarket with my walker, I came face to face with Mrs. Davis, my old neighbor from the cramped apartment on Pine Street. Time had taken its toll on her. She was stooped and gaunt, but her piercing gaze remained as sharp as ever. Alice Smith, she said, tilting her head slightly. I heard you had a bad fall, and I heard some other things too. I braced myself for the judgment. Instead, Mrs. Davis patted my hand lightly, her parchment-thin skin brushing against mine. Don't listen to gossip, she said firmly, looking me straight in the eye. Some people would rather drown than admit they were the ones who put the hole in the boat. She gave a slight nod and, leaving me stunned, moved on toward the bulk goods aisle. I finished my shopping, though it was a struggle. Back at the house, I noticed the blinking light on the answering machine. I hadn't checked it in days. Pressing the button, I heard a soft, hesitant voice. Hi, Alice. It's Betty. I guess you're busy. Just call me back when you can. Michael misses you a lot." There was a long pause, filled only with her shallow, uneven breathing. "I miss you too," she added, almost a whisper, so quiet I barely caught it. Then the line went dead. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the answering machine, unable to decipher what I was feeling. A hurricane of conflicting emotions raged inside me. Two desires warred within me: to grab the phone, to stop the chasm between us from growing wider, and to protect the fragile newborn part of myself that had blossomed in her absence. I remained frozen as the sun painted the kitchen crimson like an artist, before plunging it into deepening shadows. The phone remained silent. The doorbell never rang. The silence was heavy, patient, and all-consuming. And I just sat there. 1 week bled into the next. I waited for a call, a message, a glimpse of Betty. Anything. But the silence between us grew thicker, harder, until it became something tangible, something you could knock on, something you could break your knuckles against. The days blurred into a monotonous pattern: therapy, coffee at the daily grind, slow walks around the block with my walker. Each small step, a trip to the store, a shower without falling, pulling on my jeans by myself, felt like a monumental feat accomplished in solitude. And every so often, the thought would pierce me. Betty would get a kick out of this, and Michael would be proud of me if he could see me today. These thoughts gnawed at me more acutely than the throbbing ache in my leg where the bone was just beginning to mend. One bleak, gray afternoon, as I balanced on a rickety shopping cart, one hand gripping the cart, the other the walker, I spotted Chris Bailey near the pharmacy counter. Chris lived across the street from us when we were kids. He used to chase Betty and me with dead bugs and spray us with the hose. I wanted to duck away, pretend I didn't see him, but Chris spotted me and gave a friendly wave. "Hey, Alice," he said, walking over. His flannel shirt was frayed at the cuffs. "You're looking good." It sounded like an outright lie, but I just nodded in response. "Did you hear about the fundraiser?" he asked, shifting from foot to foot. I blinked in confusion. "What fundraiser?" He looked awkward, scratching the back of his neck. "Betty's organizing something for Michael. Apparently, he needs a couple of grand for some school trip. She says, well, that you're kind of out of the picture, that you're not helping." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing my breath. "Anyway," Chris added quickly, as if regretting having said anything at all, "she's been calling everyone, donations, volunteers, the whole shebang." Numbly, I thanked him and pushed my cart away, feeling my heart hammer in my chest. In the parking lot, the rain was coming down in cold, hard sheets. I stood there for a long time, letting it soak my jacket, my hair, my skin, until I was shivering uncontrollably. That bleak night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the chipped Formica countertop as if searching for answers that eluded me. Betty wasn't just angry. She was rewriting the past, painting me as the villain. And what was worse, people were believing her. The injustice choked me. But somewhere deep down, in the corners of my soul that no longer trembled with fear, I knew this wasn't new. Betty had always had a knack for framing things in a way that put her at the center, as the most wronged, the most betrayed. Growing up, when we fought, no matter who started it, I was. Always the one who had to apologize. As the older, responsible one, the one who should know better. Leaning back in my chair, I stared up at the ceiling. Part of me wanted to storm over to her house and demand that she tell everyone the truth, to my face. The other part just wanted to disappear, to vanish forever. The phone rang the next morning. It was my mother. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail. But curiosity, or perhaps a nagging sense of guilt, got the better of me. Within moments, I was listening to her message. Her voice was sharp, clipped, and cautionary. Alice, this is your mother. Betty's complaining that you've been distant. I know it's hard for you, but family has to stick together, especially in times like these. Call me back. Not a single question about how I was doing. Not a shred of sympathy for my injury. Just an order. Help your sister. Be there for her. Get back in the game. I angrily hit delete and threw my phone onto the couch. The following days turned into a confinement. I barely left the apartment, only occasionally venturing out for therapy. The rain, as if mocking me, lashed furiously against the windows, blurring the already gloomy world outside into shapeless gray splotches. Late one evening, there was a knock at the door. I froze, like a rabbit hearing a twig snap. No one ever visited without warning. The knock came again, more insistent and angrier. With difficulty, leaning on my walker, I slowly hobbled to the door and peered through the peephole. Betty. My heart pounded in my chest. Hesitantly, with trembling hands, I opened the door a crack. She stood on the doorstep in worn jeans and a sweatshirt, with deep shadows under tired eyes, her hair carelessly pulled back in a bun. Aren't you going to invite me in? Her voice was full of reproach and bitterness. I silently stepped back, letting her into the dimness of the living room. She stood frozen in the doorway, like a thundercloud, her arms crossed, her gaze piercing. "You could have called," she hissed, as if spitting venom. I, leaning on the walker, felt my leg respond with a dull, throbbing pain. "You could have come sooner." Betty rolled her eyes, her whole demeanor radiating superiority. "I can handle everything myself, Alice. Do you think this is easy for me?" I remained silent, tired of these constant reproaches. "You're my sister," she forced out, as if it were a heavy burden. Family helps family. The same old tired record that was making me sick. "You're the one who tells everyone I'm faking it," I said quietly, feeling a wave of resentment rising inside. Her lips curled in disdain. Rage simmered within me. "You abandoned Michael when he needed you most." "I broke my leg, Alice," she snapped back. "You can still," she began, but then stopped herself, as if she realized how ridiculous her words sounded. The rain outside intensified, drumming furiously against the windows, as if echoing our quarrel. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "But you're all I have left." Those words once could have melted my heart. They would have worked without fail before. Now they only caused fatigue and irritation. "You have Michael," I reminded her. She let out a bitter, desperate laugh. "He's a child. He doesn't understand anything. Nobody understands anything." I gripped the handles of the walker tighter, feeling my knuckles turn white. "I understand," I said firmly, "but I can't destroy myself anymore to piece your life back together." Her face faltered, as if momentarily revealing an abyss of vulnerability, but then it hardened again. You're just like Mom," she said with bitterness in her voice. "Cold. Selfish." The words struck me like a whip. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there, letting them hang in the oppressive silence between us. Betty, angrily wiping away tears, muttered something unintelligible and stormed out of the room, slamming the door with such force that a framed photograph fell off the wall. It crashed face down onto the carpet. I didn't move to pick it up. I stood for a long time, listening to the sound of the rain. The silence that followed her departure was more oppressive than any words. I stood until my leg ached from the strain, and then, with a soft groan, I hobbled to the couch and sat down. Outside, the rain didn't let up, blurring the world into a vast gray canvas. Her words pulsed in my head. Cold? Selfish? Like Mom? Maybe she's right. Maybe I've finally learned not to waste myself on those who won't even bother to offer me help. And maybe that's for the best, for once in my life. A week passed, then another. I didn't call. She even skipped her own charity event. Rumor had it that she managed to organize it, but with great difficulty. A mutual acquaintance let slip that Betty was complaining about me to anyone and everyone who would listen, accusing me of abandoning her, that I owed her something. It stung, but more than anything, it just exhausted me. One day, I was sitting in the daily grind, sipping a strong black coffee, when Jimmy, the owner of the place, silently placed a folded newspaper in front of me. "Did you see this?" he asked, his eyebrows furrowed. I blinked and ran my eyes over the headline. Local charity event marred by financial misdeeds. Below, in large print, was Betty's name. It turned out that part of the funds raised had disappeared without a trace, never reaching the school's accounts. The amount wasn't huge, but it was enough to cause whispers, enough to sow doubts, enough for Betty's flawless facade to crack. I stared blankly at the article, a strange storm of emotions rising in my chest. Shock, bitterness, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet, undeniable satisfaction. I hadn't had a hand in it, and I didn't need to. Her manic desire to always appear as a victim, a heroine, was her undoing. She destroyed herself, without my involvement. Jimmy watched me intently, his face completely impassive. "Are you okay?" he asked after a few seconds. I carefully folded the newspaper and handed it back to Jimmy. "Yes," I said, feeling the words gain weight. "I think I really am coming to my senses." I slowly finished my coffee, savoring each drop of burning bitterness, as if washing away the remnants of the past. The rain had finally relented, and leaden clouds began to dissipate over the city, allowing timid rays of the afternoon sun to pierce the gray canvas. The world around seemed crystal clear, as if reborn. I paid, nodded to Jimmy in gratitude, and stepped out onto the street, taking a deep breath of the fresh, ozonated air. And then it dawned on me. Revenge. I don't need it anymore. Not that old, bloodthirsty, destructive revenge. Life itself has put everything in its place. Betty's choice led her to the abyss, not my hatred. And me, I'm still here. Wounded, battered by the storm, maybe a little slowed down, but still standing. Still building my life, which for the first time in a long time feels truly mine.